from you so that we can take our masks off.
That's perfectly fine.
As normally, if we're moving around the corridors, we would be insisting that you wear your masks, hence our no mask, no entry sign. But for this, and in order to be able to hear me, I'm going to take it off and we'll keep a little bit of distance.
Totally understand. Principal Reed, how important was it for you in the school to create a unique guidance document? I know the Minister of Education, Honorable Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, along with the Department of Education Services, they recently toured the various schools across the Cayman Islands, specifically here at Prospect, and they were able to see how exactly we're going to be positioned and situated for our kids. So how important was that to create the guidance document unique to your school and to your students?
There are certain key concepts that have got to be common to all. And for that guidance, we've got guidance from the Chief Medical Officer, we've got guidance from the government on opening schools. But you're right, we have to make it unique to the schools because each school is different. I mean, our smaller schools in the East End can do things differently to us. We are a completely enclosed building with 28 pupils in most of our classes. So we can't operate in exactly the same way as the school next door that don't have such large class sizes. So we know our building, we know how we can make it work within a set of rules, and that's what we've had to do.
Okay, and I know the minister actually came right in when you're doing the preparations. So I know that there's still a little bit more finishing touches that we have. So let's talk about the measures and some of the, additional measures that have been put in place to ensure that when these kids come back to school, they're back in a supportive, nurturing, and safe environment.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest changes is going to be, as a visitor coming to the school, once the children are back, this is as far as you're going. Because once we go past this point, it's going to be staff and students only, because we want to limit the number of people that are coming into the building.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about these additional measures. And I know that's unique to each school, right?
Yeah, what we've done, we've taken an integrated approach across all schools throughout all 3 islands. We have standardized signage on the ground indicating the 6-foot distancing throughout the corridor. And also for the plexiglass, we're installing plexiglass barriers at all reception stations throughout the whole of the schools. There's a little backlog of plexiglass, but in the event we'll have some plastic or something else that would substitute that until we get the plexiglass on island.
All right. Now walk us through and how our kids would be able to navigate throughout the school with these additional measures.
Now, we've spent the entire summer getting every inch of the building cleaned and sanitised. So the building's absolutely sparkly. And what we can't do is have an influx of a huge number of people coming in and potentially bringing the virus in with them. The rules as they come into school, everyone moving through the corridors, as you see, is masked up. And as they move through the school, the expectation is that masks are on and we keep 3 to 6 feet apart as we're moving through the school. And we make sure that we're not colliding classes and that sort of thing. As we go into classes and the children are sat down, and there are desks, and I'll show you a classroom in a moment, the classes are set up to be socially distant. When the children are sat down and they're working quietly, at that point they can take their masks off as well so that they can take part in the lesson and they haven't got their masks on for the entire day, because that would be a bit much for them.
So we're still having ongoing works go on as we walk. So you'll see desks being moved, you'll see desks being cleaned and that type of stuff.
Okay.
What we will ensure is in place is that the students know that we only have 3 people at a time in the bathroom. We'll be drumming home to the children that when you've been in the bathroom, normally you'd be washing your hands, but at this point you're doubly washing your hands to make sure. Children will have spacing out in the corridor here to remind them that if there are other people in the bathroom, they wait and they go in, so there's only a couple in there at any point.
So as we enter this sign as standardized, 3 foot.
Keep your distance.
Keep your distance. And then in every classroom, there's 3 foot from end to end. So basically, it's about 5 foot total of social distance.
Okay.
All desks are being wiped down twice a day. When the kids go out and they come back to have their lunch, we'll have them wiped down again.
And what I'm really pleased about today is that we're allowed to once the children are sat down, they can take their masks off during lesson time so they can get on with their work. And that's really great, because I know that's been a bit of a worry for parents. And it's really going to help the children as well, because our youngest one's sitting there for 6 hours a day with a mask on. It's going to be an awful lot to ask. So it's going to really help. I mean, we do want to try and keep it as normal as we can for the children, but obviously moderated by keeping it safe at the same time. So we're going to divide up the playground so that each year group has its own, or each class has its own area. So they can come out, they can have a bit of a run round.
And Mr. Gardner, you were mentioning about the outdoor provisions.
Mainly, we have some waiting areas at front. When the kids are dropped off in the morning, they'll be separated between the three areas. And also, at each exit point and entry point into the building, we've removed the water fountains and installed hand sinks. We're having dispensers to dry your hands and also soap to wash your hands installed. That's going to be installed shortly. But at the water fountains on the outside of the building, we're going to replace with this type of system.
Mr. Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's talk about the canteen services and how food will be consumed and how food will be served.
Sure, definitely. The good thing about the canteen service is that it was one service that really had the protocols established long before we had any issues with regard to COVID, because typically canteen servers would be in a position where they would have been covered with masks, they would have used gloves, they would have sanitized the dinnerware that was being used. So all of that will continue. The key part that will be quite different is that meals themselves won't be served within the cafeteria area. They'll be served within the classroom, right? And some schools may have all meals picked up for class and taken to the classroom. It may be a case where students are coming and collecting meals and going back to the classroom, but that's up to the organization of the school and how best they do it. But the important thing is that it'll be covered meals, and the eating of the meals wouldn't be in the cafeteria space itself.
Thank you, Principal Reed, for just giving us a little bit more insight, and Mr. Ray to you as well. But I'm going to stay with you a little longer because I know that there are some measures and protocols for new school bus transportation.
Absolutely.
So we're going to head out and check the school buses for some of those measures.
Absolutely.
Let's go. Mr. Ray, I feel like I'm going back to school. It just feels like that because we're here at Barnes Bus Transport Depot, where we're going to be talking about the school bus transportation protocols. I know this is really important. So what can you tell us with this?
Sure. So ordinarily, in a normal environment, we would have had our school children just sitting on the bus and being transported as normal. With the advent of COVID, of course, we had to put other protocols in place. And the main thing that we are going to do, we're going to make sure that we sanitize hands when they get onto the bus. And the bus companies, they have their strategies of how they're going to start with social distancing. But the reality is that we can't maintain physical distancing within the bus. We would have way too many trips. It will take too long for kids to get to school. So we are allowed to have 2 per seat. But here at Barnes Bus Transport, Mr. Barnes has his strategy, as all the other bus companies do, in terms of how they're going to allocate students to seats. So I think it might be useful to speak to him.
Okay. Oh, wow. So we have there are markings.
Now we have this marking for a reason. You know that it's 2 to a seat, but we start with not with the X's. Where you see the blank, you can sit there. Mr. Mark will sit on the other side. And then who else? Animal come. Then the next student will sit here. And then the next one will sit here until the bus is full up down. So the bus will be sprayed. That will be before each pickup. And after we drop the children off and let them off at school, then the bus warden or the driver will sanitize with a little hand beer.
Yes, because they touch a lot of different places.
Anyway, that we will do that each time before the bus go back out. Now, when the bus ready to go back out for the second pickup, we'll do the same thing again. And each entrance for the bus, children will sanitize the hand. And the bus warden sits here. The driver sits there. Nobody sits across from the driver. So the driver will have no connection with the children, only the warden, unless the driver have to get involved in something.
Basically, Shanda, I think the important points, we making sure that not only the students, but the bus driver and the bus warden are kept safe. So the disinfecting, the sanitization of hands, the X's on the seats to kind of demarcate where students should sit initially until the bus fills up. All of these are protocols that we're putting in place just to make sure that we keep everyone safe, spaced as much as possible for the initial part of the trip. But as more students get on, we are allowed, we've got clearance from public health to allow 2 per seat, provided that masks are worn constantly throughout the trip. Mr. Barnes is just one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Saturday special press briefing. I'm Donna Bush. I'm so glad you could join us, as always, on our various channels, as well as listening in on Radio Cayman. We welcome our panelists, starting with His Excellency the Governor, the Honorable Premier, the Honorable Minister of Health, and the Honorable Minister for Education. With us in studio are the Chief Medical Officer, the Director of HMCI, the Sign Language Interpreter, members of the media, some of whom are joining us via Zoom, as well as Dr. Samuel Williams Rodriguez. We first go to the Minister for Education for today's prayer.
Let us pray. Father God, we just want to take a stand to pause to thank you for your many blessings. Lord, we thank you for taking us through the safe passage of Hurricane Delta. Lord, we've been journeying through the storm of coronavirus, and Lord, you've taken us safe this far. Lord, we thank you for the good news that we're about to report today, Lord, and we are continuing to trust you to take us safely through. Lord, we thank you for all of the medical staff, the frontline workers, those who are doing the tests, those who are doing the contact tracing. We thank you for our Governor, the Premier, the Honourable Minister of Health, and all those, Lord, in the media who help us to disseminate this word to our people, Lord. We pray that your steady hand would instill a peace that passeth all understanding upon these beloved Cayman Islands today. And Lord, for all that you have done and for your anticipated blessings, we say thanks in the wonderful name of Jesus, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Minister O'Connor Connolly. We now go to Dr. Lee.
Good afternoon. I'm wearing a red t-shirt today. As some of you will know, red is a very lucky colour for Chinese people. And for us too. I have 346 results to report today. I have 346 results to report today. There is one positive in a returning traveller. As we know, yesterday was a busy day, and yesterday my heart was heavy. Today my heart is light, and I'm exceedingly reassured by what I'm going to advise you of. Following the announcement that there was a positive student at Red Bay Primary School, the Public Health Department swiftly moved to go to swab a number of people at the school. The whole affair, I have it reported, was exceedingly well organised, and I really appreciate the help of course, public health swinging into action, but also from the teachers, staff, students. I mean, a lot of people were swabbed, parents, bus drivers. Thank you to them all. This was a really big operation to get together in a very short period of time. 207 people were swabbed, both at the school and at the needs assessment unit where a parent worked who was involved. But at the same time, public health were also, and the HSA were also involved in receiving returning travellers at the airport coming in from Miami, so they were doing further swabs there. I thank all of the staff for that, and of course to the laboratory staff who were working until after 4 this morning in order to return the negative results to us, apart from the traveller, but to return the results to us. So thank you very much to them. As I wanted to give you a little bit more detail about the positive case because I know everybody is interested. We had a weak positive result. So whenever we have a weak positive result, we do confirmatory tests. Those confirmatory tests have in fact come back as negative in the same person, both in the same sample and on repeated samples. However, given the fact that this person has symptoms symptoms of a respiratory infection, we feel that we need to report this result as positive. I met with the Health Services Authority and the Public Health Department this morning, including laboratory staff, to discuss the whole of nature of this outbreak, and as to the right next steps. So as a group, we have come to what I'm presenting today. You'll recall I mentioned that the father yesterday returned a negative result, the mother of the child returned a negative result, and also the child's sibling all returned negative results, although the father and the child have had some symptoms. So it is possible that this is a trailing infection that we've picked up in the child, but in fact the family have a common cold. That is one possible scenario. There will be questions about whether this is a false positive. Clearly, we discussed that briefly yesterday, but as I said, we've worked through why we feel this is not so. There are a lot of checks that go not only in an individual test itself, but on the whole batch of tests as they run through, as well as the regular quality assurance program that the laboratory is subject to. And as you will recall, this is an ISO-accredited laboratory, and the laboratory at the HSA is a JCI-accredited laboratory. As far as the school children are concerned, we have advised already the Ministry of Education that the Year 2 students should be isolated for a period of 14 days from their last contact with their other fellow pupil, and I believe that contact was Friday the 2nd of October, so they should remain isolated until the 16th of October, and then will be retested on Saturday the 17th or at the next available earliest convenience, and that will need to be discussed, obviously, because Saturday, well, it's not only is it a Saturday, but it's also the day that we're holding a healthcare conference, so it is a busy day for the Health Services Authority and other healthcare workers. Because this child's result showed a very low viral load, the child is unlikely to have been infectious, so that is a bit of good news. Also coupled with the fact that every other person that's possibly been in contact with the child that we have so far tested has come back as negative. This is hugely reassuring to myself, and I'm sure to you all as well. I would like to remind everybody that if they become symptomatic, particularly if you're one of the households that is in isolation and you get any symptoms at all, any symptoms of a cough or a cold or other respiratory illness or a fever, or any medical symptoms that you're at all concerned about, please do contact the flu hotline, which continues to operate 24 hours with your queries, and they can advise you what to do next. You will be aware that the Health Services Authority drive-through was open today to take samples, and that opportunity was exceeded their capacity. They were working very hard and they had to extend the hours, but it is now stopped. But it will open again on Monday between 7 and 9:30 in the morning if you wish to avail yourself of testing, please attend the Health Service Authority drive-through. I think that's more or less it. Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for that. Any questions from members of the media? No? Yep, Ralph. Okay, no problem.
Good afternoon, Dr. Lee, and thank you for the good news. I know in the past you have said that there have been some reluctance for people to come forward to get testing. I understand a long line was at the hospital this morning. Would you start encouraging people to come forward again?
I think we need to continue this vigilance. I keep saying that the risk is not zero. It's very low in the Cayman Islands, but it's not zero. There are risk events that are happening all the time, particularly with people coming across our borders. We keep getting positive tests coming back from all of the different countries that we're having flights from. So that risk is not zero. I would encourage you, if you're concerned, come forward. Clearly, if you have symptoms, please contact and ask for health advice before you just present. Please ask for that advice first. And we're continuing our screening of all of the major at-risk groups, such as healthcare workers, prison staff, care homes, people who work at the ports and the airports.
Is there a cost for the testing?
No, there still remains no cost for the test if you're turning up for the test that's provided by public health.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Donna.
Dr. Lee, we do have another question for you. Wendy, please go ahead from CNS.
Thanks, Donna. It's just a very quick question for Dr. Lee with regards to isolation. He said that all of the students and their families, presumably, and staff and everyone should remain in isolation for 2 weeks. So does that mean home isolation? You're talking about all the kids staying together in a bubble, or you're talking about regular home isolation for everyone?
Yes, I'm talking about regular home isolation. So the children would return to their households, and those households, the entire household, would need to remain isolated for the period as stated. The dates I gave for isolation may vary for some other groups. For example, if there was another contact that contact tracing is continuing, if there was another contact that fell outside of those time periods, as there probably likely are, that those dates will obviously be adjusted accordingly, but public health would advise people of that adjustment.
Okay, and can I just clarify, will we be reverting back to, in these circumstances, given that it's sort of being treated as a community transmission, are we looking at trust again rather than giving, or are people going to get the geofencing risk, or will it just be like it was before in lockdown? If somebody got infected, they went into home isolation and were trusted to stay home.
We currently don't have any plans to introduce the geofencing technology to this group. We almost certainly don't have the resources to do it. So we would continue with what has worked for Cayman very well, and I really appreciate the compliance of everybody to continue with isolation as we have done since March, April of this year.
Right. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay. Dr. Lee?
Actually, can we get an update, because we didn't get it yesterday, what the current numbers are for people in the number of home isolation households and the number of people in government facilities?
I had thought, I certainly provided, I apologize, Wendy, I don't have that information here.
Okay.
I did provide it.
I'll email for it later.
I did provide it to GIS yesterday. I would have thought they would have released it, but I apologize that I don't have it. But along that point, I would like to let you know that it's very sad to report that the person who is in the Health Services Authority who has been suffering is now requiring ventilator support.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, Wendy, does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Dr. Lee, one question from the public as it relates to CARFA. Are the tests still being sent, the results being tested again to CARFA?
We had a problem with the short answer is no, they're not currently. There is right across all of the UK overseas territories there where PCR testing has been introduced, we're trying to set up a quality assurance system that will work across the UCOTs. We're not sure what that's going to look like yet. Public Health England is looking into that for us. There are a lot of internal controls that are already happening at both of the laboratories to give us the reassurance that we need. But in addition to that, as you probably know, it's been previously reported, and apart from the initial use of CARFA, the HSA's laboratory also was part of a trial with the WHO, which they came out having their results as 100% accurate against a trial panel of specimens.
Okay, we do have one other question from the Compass, Kevin Morales.
Good afternoon, Dr. Lee. So presumably the family of the year 2 students will also have to quarantine for 2 weeks?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit more information on the condition of the person who is an active case who's now on the ventilator?
Not really more, apart from that's a deterioration.
Okay.
The person wasn't previously requiring ventilator support, so that is a deterioration.
Okay. And beyond the isolation for that specific class, are there any other recommendations that you're making to the Premier or the Minister?
It's an isolation for that year group, so it's not just a class, it's more than one class. We have discussed extensively as to whether we should change the status of where we are now. I've continued to advise people to be cautious because the risk is not zero, to wear masks, attend to respiratory etiquette, distance when you don't know people, if you feel the need to do so. And also, of course, hand hygiene. It looks like respiratory infections are rising, as they often do in the winter. So it looks like coughs and colds are going to come back, and that's going to confuse us. Okay. In this period that we have heightened concern around COVID, I would ask that everybody who gets any cough and cold symptoms, because it's impossible to distinguish them, to isolate themselves until such time as they've been checked out by the doctor, call the flu hotline, get advice, in order that we can try to keep ourselves as safe as we can. Mm-hmm. I feel that this particular case, although it has caused a large response, is probably not a clinical threat to the community, which is why we haven't changed any, I haven't recommended any change in the guidance. Obviously, the final decision is with the Cabinet, the government, but I haven't recommended that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. We go now to our Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. Good news, excellent news. I can't say that many of us had much sleep overnight, worrying about the implications of this incident had the result been the other way. It has been a massive test on the system and the protocols that we have in place, and the entire system has performed admirably. I can't say enough thanks to Dr. Lee, the team at HSA, the lab folk, the public health folk who have worked incredibly hard to deliver the result of 207 tests, plus the others of travelers overnight. We were not aware of this situation until about 10 o'clock yesterday morning. So I think, judged by any standard anywhere, this is an incredible performance. And we all have the right to be very, very proud of Cayman's ability to respond to this threat and to incidents such as this. I've said before, Dr. Lee says all the time, there is a global pandemic. People are coming and going from the Cayman Islands. And even though we have in place probably some of the most robust protocols in the world with respect to how we handle persons who are coming and going, there are still risks inherent in the system. And we all need to live our lives and to think about that. And those people who are on the front line, which is why we are so grateful to them for continuing to accept, if not volunteer, regular testing, is how we will best be able to assess whether or not the virus is beginning community spread again. As I move about this community, and of course last night was a particularly difficult night to move about this community when you're premier, the one resounding and constant message I get from almost everybody who speaks to me, Premier, we can't go back into lockdown again. We can't go back into lockdown again. I need to be able to go out and have a drink. I need to be able to go to church. I need to be able to send my children to school. And it is only by virtue of our continued collective vigilance as a community that we will be able to retain this status in the long term. None of us know how long this pandemic is going to continue. There are no indications that any of us have that it is going to go away anytime soon. And so we have to be able to manage the pandemic as we have done these past months in a way that allows us to have some semblance of normalcy in terms of our existence in these beloved islands. And so I simply today give God thanks, and as well as thanks to all of those who have worked as his instruments to to make sure that we are where we are. And I want to thank the community for their awareness and their cooperation in ensuring that we retain this privileged status, which at this point, few countries in the world are able to enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Donna. And let me just echo what the Premier has said, really. I mean, this is really reassuring news. And I think, again, it has shown just what this was a great test of our system, and it was on a wide scale as well. And the system has performed extremely well. And I think we've been in sort of crisis mode since March because of COVID. But our crisis management systems, which have been tested, have just got really, really good because of that. And we saw that in Storm Delta as well, with the way we responded to that. So I think our systems are performing very well. And there are international lessons around the best response, and we're doing all of them and then some more. So that robust system for testing, tracing and isolating with results within 24 hours, contact tracing over at least 80%. We're going well beyond that, and also very strong adherence to the rules around isolation, 14 days, and we're doing that very well. And we've got a lot more additional measures in place. So I do believe that can give us confidence. So let me just say a huge thank you to everyone who's working so hard to bring this about, and particularly public health over the last couple of days, who have really performed fantastically. And thank you again to everyone in the community for their cooperation.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Minister for Education.
Thanks, Donna. I just wish also to go on record to thank Dr. Lee and his team at HSA. I want to particularly thank my team at Education for the sterling way in which they responded and still is responding to what occurred yesterday to test our system. I also wish to indicate that there are 54 students currently enrolled in Year 2 at the Red Bear Primary School, and there are 6 associated teachers. All have been tested, and I'm extremely delighted to hear that all except the one that Dr. Lee talked about earlier that was positive, the remnant are all negative. The ministry is currently working over the weekend as well, because obviously this will have a domino effect on our teachers, because at the Georgetown Primary, the Clifton High School and the John Gray have teachers who had children within the Year 2. So we followed the procedure that we have had in place and have been agreed by Public Health since early April for a recovery and continuation plan. And so they will be out for the directed amount of time. But I want parents to be fully assured that my acting chief officer and the director of education services are assiduously working to find support teachers to ensure that during this time that the children would still be the recipients of our curriculum being implemented. The good thing is that the time that it has happened, we're going in next week, Thursday, into our midterm break. So basically we're looking at a coverage from Monday to Thursday. So God is good in every respect. And I'm very, very pleased to have the results this morning.
Thank you, Minister O'Connor-Connolly. Minister of Health.
Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. Matthew 18:20. We're with you again today for another press briefing to keep you updated. And, but as you've heard, with such good news, I was checking my phone all night for the results. And went to sleep with my fingers crossed. And by God's grace, has been shown to us once again. We do have a positive day, positive today in the Traveler. We continue to pray for those that are positive, and especially for the one COVID-19 patient in the hospital. This is the one time in our lifetime that the word positive in itself is not always a good thing, although they always tell us to think positive. But now we're expecting a negative result. So, no pun intended there, but I want to thank once again, publicly thank the Ministry of Education and Public Health for coming together to work efficiently, calmly, and effectively to manage the situation. But I'd also like to thank the parents who are so willing to be tested and have their children tested and to isolate accordingly. It really does take the entire community working together to continue to have such successful outcomes. I cannot reiterate enough. Please continue to be vigilant, to practice good hygiene processes by washing your hands and wearing your masks where necessary. We live in a COVID-19 world, despite our good position here in Cayman. We have Caymanians traveling all the time back and forth for university, for college purposes with their children, etc. Please do not let our guards down. And if you're feeling ill, please take every precaution necessary and get tested. Even when a vaccine becomes available or have been found to work, one, we need to get it. And number two, you need to be willing to take it. So these are things to think about. Also today, we were very pleased to see such a healthy turnout from members of the community to be tested at the drive-thru testing facility. As you heard earlier, the public health team has confirmed that the testing operation this morning went smoothly. On that note, I would like to advise the public that the drive-thru testing facility will be open again on Monday morning at 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Just to reiterate, please remember to bring along your ID, including a photo identification for any children being tested, and to also wear your mask. No pre-registration is necessary. Finally, I wish to end by thanking the lab personnel at our public health department for their tremendous efforts since yesterday and overnight, indeed working into the wee hours of this morning to get all the necessary testing done. I thank you, and our country thanks you for your swift action and hard work. May God continue to bless you in your labors. Let's keep working together and all doing our parts to keep Cayman safe. God bless.
Thank you, Minister Seymour. We're going to go straight to April. Dr. Lee, you have something to say first?
If I may, excuse
Sure,
me, Donna,
yeah.
just to give the figures that were asked for previously.
Sure.
In the isolation facilities, there are 191 people. At home, there are 220 home isolating. Sorry, these are yesterday's figures. And the flu calls yesterday were 4, all flu related.
Okay, thank you very much. April?
Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. My question is for the Minister of Education. Thank you for being with us today. I wondered in the process of all this whether we've learned anything, discovered any gaps that need filling, because we've had a lot go on this past week. And I just wondered if there was any area that we're now seeing might be something that we can bolster up, or whether we're very happy with where we are and think, the way we have things set up is good to go.
I believe the way that things are set up and have indeed been proven yesterday are excellent. I mean, obviously we learn because COVID-19 is not a stagnant virus, but as to date, I'm pleased with what transpired yesterday and today.
And also, one of the temptations sometimes when someone is tested and the results are negative, even though they're supposed to isolate, there's this feeling, I'm okay, and you may not be as strict about the self-isolation protocol. You have parents and teachers and young students, and I just wondered if you would speak a little to encouraging people to take seriously the need to isolate themselves and follow all the protocols.
Well, I think that HSA and the Minister has done a sterling job, and the Minister of Health, through this forum led by Governor and Honourable Premier, and the media themselves. But I think that there needs to be an element of responsibility, because there's no need to unduly inject fear, because it has not yet been proven to be a remedy anywhere in the world, and Cayman is no exception in that. I think that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers, but as the Caribbean saying goes, out of my mother's children, I love thee best. This is the one exceptional time I think it needs to be adhered with keeping your social distance, washing your hands, making sure that you take your vitamins or your regular underlying issue medication. But I think that the word has gone out and it has resonated with the majority of our populace, because that was seen yesterday. As soon as the word got out, some in adulterated formats, albeit, parents came and they were responsible, you know, they adhered to the rules and regulation, and they didn't have to be seconded. They lined up. And indeed, this morning, people were still calling, you know, could we go and get the test, because their child was in the school and they wanted to take those precautions. So I think that this once again signifies the significance of it being a tripartite relationship. Yes, it's government. Yes, it's my teachers and the students at school, but parental responsibility is going to weigh very heavily. We were given these children by Almighty God. We need to ensure that they wear their mask, that they do every single thing that public health tells them to do. And if there's a fever and the symptoms, call the hotline. We are there as government to fill those gaps, and we have been doing that. I'm very happy to be in a government led by the Premier, who has taken this quite seriously.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, April, and Minister of Education. Before we go to Wendy, there is one question that I have from the public. Actually, there are two messages from two moms that are at Red Bay School. They've tested negative, as we all said. Their children have tested negative. Now they have to stay home, and they're worried about how they're going to be able to do that. One of them in particular says they own a business. They rely on that business to be able to feed their family. So, yeah.
Well,
You can go ahead.
I think that everything in life takes a sacrifice. And as the good book says, obedience is better than sacrifice. I believe that it has been proven, not just by the World Health Association, but by England Public Health and through Dr. Lee, that there's that period of 14 days. And I believe that the sacrifice of ensuring that we stay at home so that we protect those that we love, those that are in the quarantine, has to rise above the economic benefit. Now, obviously, people still have to survive, unless it's a self-employment where there's only one person. We're now into the age of technology. You can still run your business from Hong Kong to Cayman, so I believe we can still do it within the jurisdiction of Cayman. If there is an undue financial hardship, this government has proven over the course of this uncharted waters of COVID-19 that if there is a need, government in many different aspects, different ministries, full endorsed by a Premier and our cabinet, have stepped forward and assisted financially.
Thank you.
I would just add to that, while I understand full well and have great empathy for people who are not able to work in these circumstances, I need those that particular person to bear in mind, as I ask everybody to bear in mind, that if we, God forbid, the individual is carrying the virus and goes to their workplace, they run the risk then of infecting the other staff, customers, and beyond that. And if your staff is infected and become ill, then the consequences are far graver, economically we're talking about, than if you isolate yourself and, as the minister has suggested, do everything you can to direct the affairs of your business from home. None of this is easy, and as the minister said, all of this comes at great sacrifice. But we need people to continue to think, not just in that particular situation, but those who run the hotels, own the hotels as well. If this economy has to be shut down again, the consequences are so grave that I try not even to think about them in the long term. We've got the economy up and running in a way that none of us could have hoped. In my wildest dreams, I never thought we would be as well off as we are, given the circumstances, when you see what's happening all around us. But development and construction in the local economy is keeping us going. If we have to shut all of that down, the consequences are going to be, I don't want to even think about them.
Thank you very much.
I just want people to bear that in mind. Stay home for the 7 days, and we'll be good.
Thank you very much, Premier McLaughlin. We have questions from Wendy at CNS. Wendy?
Thanks, Donna. I just want to clarify, just to make sure that I'm hearing right, that the minute Red Bay School will be open on Monday, yes. It's just the children from year 2 that won't be there.
I can hear her.
She's there.
She's saying, yeah, she's there.
Wendy, we're going to have to ask you to just give us a couple of seconds so we can get your audio up. They did not hear the question, so please bear with us for a moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Can the minister just confirm Red Bay School will be open on Monday? It's just a year 2 that will be out.
Correct.
Okay, brilliant. That's what I wanted to clarify with the minister. And also, Mr. Premier, any sign yet of the numbers for Travel Cayman team or no?
Sorry, any what?
Any sign of the number of people that are working on the Travel Cayman team? I wondered if you'd managed to get that number yet.
I'm sorry, Wendy, I didn't know that was a question I was supposed to go and get answers to. I didn't ask.
I was just taking my chance. I wasn't necessarily expecting you to. I was taking a chance.
No, I'm sorry, I was distracted by other things, as you might.
I'll just keep asking, don't worry.
I'll ask though. I will.
Thank you. I'm done, Donna. Thank you very much.
Okay, Wendy, thank you very much. Next up, we have Kevin from the Compass.
Thanks, Donna. Minister O'Connor-Connolly, these students that will be isolating, how will they participate in class for those 2 weeks?
It's not 2 weeks.
1 week.
Sorry for that 1 week.
For your online learn.
And sorry, and it's also midterm coming up, so.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Premier. It's basically Monday to Thursday and practice that we're talking about because of midterm. So they will be doing online, which we've perfected somewhat since we had the practice period from March 20th when we closed down. But we also have the default methodology of the traditional way of teaching through books, which we luckily purchased a year ago, and they all have at home. And so I'm confident that we'll get over these 4 days.
And do you know, have these students been the recipients of the laptops that were going to be made available to government school children?
The full order of the 5,020 laptops that we did the RFP for is not yet on the island, but we're in a better position now than March through the partnership of government and private sector. So I believe that because of the shortness of the period and the limit of year 2, which has the 54 students, that we should be in good order.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And I do have one more question, I'm sorry, for Dr. Lee. So do you mind if we
No problem.
make a little switch? All right. Thank you, Dr. Lee. We've talked in the past about your feelings on antibody testing. I'm curious, do you see any potential benefit to using antibody testing for those who are either at the school or the parents of the children?
I think we undoubtedly will do that. The problem is that there's a lag time. So even if we demonstrate something, we still need to act quickly on the things we have at hand. We talked about it this morning at the meeting. It would be very useful to do it. But the IgG result only can be confidently rises at 28 days. Clearly, some people will rise earlier, but at 28 days, you can be sure that everybody who is going to have an antibody response, because not everybody does, will have had an antibody response by 28 days. So we've got a little bit of time to wait until we have the answer.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
This question, I think, is for you, Dr. Lee. A parent who their family spent several nights with a year 2 family, they had a sleepover basically, is concerned and wants to know what they should do. Should they self-isolate? They haven't had symptoms or anything. They had extended close contact over a couple of days.
I think if they could please contact public health. I mean, if I'm provided with the details, I can pass them to public health, or if they can ring the flu hotline and identify themselves, and public health can follow through and talk with them as to what they need to do.
So there's just no standard across the board, just call and talk through your situation.
Well, the issue about we mentioned before the issue, and I think possibly earlier today, but I did a recording, so I'm not sure whether it was on the recording or on this live thing. The issue about close contact is with the person that has COVID-19. If they don't have COVID-19, then you've been in contact with somebody else, that's a secondary contact and it's not of concern. But if it's with that person, it needs to be for more than 15 minutes at less than 6 feet. So it sounds like what you're probably describing is a secondary contact, which would not be vigilant, but would not be of concern. But if they'd like confirmation, please contact the flu hotline.
Thank you very much. And then the other question, I'm not sure who answers, it relates to the school facility itself. The parent asked, has it been sanitized? And I wanted to throw that out to whomever should answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to report that once we were notified, as I said, we acted in full accordance with our protocols, and one of that being that we canceled the after-school program, which was YMCA, in order to facilitate the full cleaning of the school. And I was reliably informed this morning that in fact did occur.
Thank you very much.
I have another question from the public, actually from quite a few people. People are a little bit confused about the quarantine period because I think it falls into when kids are out of school. So they're a bit confused. So if somebody could explain exactly what the quarantine period, how long it is, and they have to just kind of consider the time that they're on midterm break within that period.
So the quarantine period for anybody who has been identified as a contact of somebody with COVID-19 is 14 days from that contact.
Okay. So the year 2 kids, all of the classes, those students will be under quarantine, self-isolation.
Correct.
With parents and their families.
Self-isolation with that household for 14 days since the contact, because as I understand, the contact was actually last Friday on the 2nd, which is why we're talking about a week from now as being the time we will retest everybody before they are released.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you very much for that. We do have one question from Ralph. No? Good. Okay. No more questions from the media? Any final remarks?
Just wanted to thank the leaders and the staff at the Red Bay Primary School who did a wonderful job during this time. Thank you very much.
I just
Minister of Education?
My DS staff and acting chief officer has confirmed that they are already contacting the students for year 2 for distribution of the computers from Monday through the quarantine period. And just to follow on from what Dr. Lee said, the midterm break basically it does not exist if you're given 14 days quarantine until the termination of the 14 days, and hopefully they'll have some time remaining.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mayor McLaughlin, any final words?
No, I think I've said enough. Just wish everybody a happy what's left of the weekend.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And of course, we thank you, the public, for joining us for today's briefing, and to our panel and in-studio guests, also those joining us via Zoom. Remember, you can go online to gov.ky for the very latest information as well as results on a daily basis. As the Honorable Premier said, enjoy the rest of your weekend.